One of the teams this year that's definitely been at more of a crossroads than others is the Atlanta Falcons. And they're at a crossroads between either deciding to fully, I guess, tank and try to get a high draft pick in 2026, or actually go for it and put together a contending team in the NFC South. Something that does make that decision a little bit, I guess, obvious what their choice was is the fact that addition-wise, this team didn't do a whole lot in the offseason. They didn't make any trades. You look at defensively what they added. 3 of their top additions were on the defensive side of the ball. You have Leonard Floyd, Devine Diablo, and Morgan Fox coming over. 3 guys who are probably started or who are going to be a starter for this team and play a majority of the snaps on the defensive side of the ball. It also was 3 positions where you did need a massive influx of talent and ability added to those positions. Between the lack of getting after the passer and the inability to limit the passing game as a whole, this team needed a complete overhaul. And yes, they did add some solid players. But they don't really have anything that you point at and say, this was a major upgrade. I think Leonard Floyd could be one of the better or one of the worst free agency signings of this year, and we could even see that Leonard Floyd gets traded before the end of this year. Devine Diablo, he's a guy who I don't think he ever really broke through with the Raiders, but he was one of those guys who was kind of relied upon to possibly break through. And Morgan Fox was just, a pretty reliable guy for the Chargers. The Falcons did also re-sign Mike Hughes, and they keep together a pretty solid secondary between Hughes, A.J. Terrell, Jesse Bates. You just have a pretty good secondary, but again, if the pass rush is going to be lacking again, it's really not going to matter how talented your secondary is because they're just going to have more time against them. It definitely was more talent going out the door than it was coming in the door for the Atlanta Falcons. Grady Jarrett was released basically at the beginning of free agency. Drew Dalman actually went with Grady Jarrett to the Chicago Bears. And you lose other guys like Nathan Landman, Lorenzo Carter, and Richie Grant. But it's mostly with those top 2 players. You probably lost your best defensive lineman, probably lost one of, if not your best, offensive lineman. And again, it's just one of those things where it's probably pointing in the direction for the Falcons where they're probably not going to be as competitive as maybe their fans want them to be, or maybe as the team itself wants to be. You just see a team right now with Michael Penix as the starting quarterback. And yes, there's playmakers around him. You have Robinson, you have London, you have hopefully a continuation of a great year from Darnell Mooney and from Ray McLeod. But, what are we going to expect from Kyle Pitts? Are we going to expect an 800-yard year, or are we going to expect, more of the same these last few years that we've gotten from him, which is just, good, but pretty much average production at the tight end position. Nothing that you can really point at and say that he's a reason that you're successful. I mean, this was another year where Kyle Pitts, less than 50 catches, 4 touchdowns, 600 yards. It's fair to say that it was a poor year from Kyle Pitts again. And part of the reason that they're set up, with this roster to be maybe more of I don't want to call them a bottom feeder. Let's just maybe call them an underachiever in 2025. Part of that reason, they had one of the worst draft classes in 2024. When you look at just the value that all of those players put together had, yes, Michael Penix is going to be hopefully a good player, but nobody on that team started even half of the games this year, even played half of the games. I mean, there's just nothing that you can choose from that draft class in 2024 to say that you can rely on them going forward and that you have even a solid base of what they can be, because they just didn't play. None of them really played, and none of them put together a good enough year while they did play to even make the most of it. And so that kind of sets up the draft this year to where it is a good position for Atlanta to be in, because it's just prioritizing adding talent. And especially with only 5 selections in this year's draft, prioritizing talent is going to be just the number one goal. It cannot be drafting for team need. It cannot be drafting for positional need. It just needs to be addition. And it even can be trading the picks. I mean, you can trade back out of the first round entirely for more second and third round picks. But like I'm saying, it just needs to be adding talent at the end of the day. There has not been enough done from the 2024 class, or even classes before then. I mean, yes, Bijan Robinson, Drake London have been decent selections, but when you look at like some of the second and third round picks, I mean, you're looking at names like Desmond Ridder, you're looking at names like Arnold Ebiketie, you're looking at names, you're just looking at guys that you just aren't relying on now because either they're not on the team or you're not relying on because they have rightfully been relegated to a reserve role. And just these guys have not put together, they haven't put together a year yet where you say that you really can rely on anyone outside of Drake London and Bijan Robinson. I would say those are probably the 2 guys that you can rely on offensively every single year. And defensively, I mean, maybe it's Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. That's really all you have. And so I guess just to get back to the overall point with the draft, it's got to be adding talent. The final thing to kind of leave off with is we didn't really get a resolution on the Kirk Cousins situation. And it looks like it's just going to be, he's going to be on the team until he's not, I guess. And we don't really see a clear ending, whether that's this offseason, during the regular season, or maybe never until he just gets released, or his contract expires. But all of those things put together, like I kind of mentioned at the beginning, this seems like it's leading up to maybe just a tank year. And for Atlanta, that's a pretty good situation to be in because you don't have a good team here yet. You don't really have a great coaching staff either, in my opinion. And I just don't think you have the tools set up for yourself, even in a weak NFC South, where there's a good chance that a team is going to be 9-8 representing that division in the playoffs. You just don't have a good enough team even in that division. And for that reason, I honestly think that maybe this grade is like a C+ or a C for what they've done this year. They've done nothing good. Like I've mentioned, they've done nothing really, really good. But they are setting themselves up possibly to lose a lot of games. And that is kind of what Atlanta needs to do, is get a premium draft pick, have the ability to take a top flight pass rusher, and maybe somebody that can be the cornerstone offensive lineman for the next 10 years, maybe another playmaker on offense if we really want to go that route. But like I'm saying, it just sets them up to get to that point where at least they have a choice in what they want to do. Right now, they just don't really have much of a direction. But, maybe that's the good thing going forward, is that they just kind of sputter out. This team hasn't bottomed out for a long time. Since Matt Ryan was the number 1 overall pick by Atlanta a while ago, this team hasn't just bottomed out. And so I think it's a good time to just reset the deck, re-add, retool, do as much as you can in the offseason these next few years, and actually put together a competitive team.